Thank you. Obviously, this is my first time at the MacGill School. I don't know why, but I'm glad to be presenting here today. So, as Derry said, I'm the head of treatment and enterprise with Dublin Simon Community. And I suppose just back to the speakers this morning, which I found really interesting, back to Professor Tony Fahy and something that he was saying. I am from a family of 8 siblings, of which there was never any expectation to go to third level education. But because I'm from Tipperary, the home of hurling, I did sneak in the back door at the age of 30 years, and I managed to get into third level education at that point. That's after I had trained as a nurse. Funnily enough, I don't have any children either. I guess in terms of homelessness has been with us for many years, and it will be with us for many years to come. But if we consider the data that is available to us, the problem is expected to get a lot worse than it already is. We don't only see an increase in the number of people who are temporarily roofless or chronically homeless, but also a change in who is immediately affected by homelessness. The media focuses at the moment a lot on families who have lost their homes, and pressures are high to provide accommodation of some type. Housing lists are getting longer by the day, but clearly only focusing on housing is not enough. So, I would like you to consider Paul, and I'd like to take just the next few minutes to listen to Paul's story. I'll have to use my glasses for this. So Paul is a 35-year-old single man who has been homeless for 10 years. He has slept rough for most of this time with periodic stays in hospital and hostels. I met Paul when he was admitted to the Dublin Simon Treatment Service. Paul's father left the family home when Paul was 7. Up to this time, Paul lived with extreme domestic violence at the hands of his father towards Paul, his 3 younger siblings, and his mother. When Paul's father moved out, his mother went out to work to try and keep the family together. She lost her job due to an industrial accident at work. Following this, Paul's mother became depressed and unable to care for her children. Paul and his siblings were parted and moved in and out of foster care. At the age of 13, Paul began to dabble in alcohol and hash, and he subsequently dropped out of school at 16. At this age, he went to London and began working on construction sites. He was very talented and quickly worked his way up and became foreman on the site. He was foreman at the age of 25. When Paul was 25, his mother died, and Paul came back to Ireland for her funeral. There he met his siblings for the first time in over 9 years. He decided to stay in Ireland and try his luck in construction here, but soon after he signed up with a construction company, the economic crash hit, and Paul lost his job within months. 2 big losses in such a short space of time, and with no place to call home, Paul began drinking heavily. His siblings were not in a position to support him, and quickly he became homeless, living in hostels and on the street. While living on the street, Paul drank heavily and began to take harder drugs such as heroin and also benzodiazepines such as Valiums. His mental health suffered, and he was admitted to a hospital on 2 occasions following suicidal attempts. He suffers from severe anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder, most likely relating back to the domestic abuse that he experienced as a child. For Paul, his sense of home was lost in his childhood. So thanks for listening to Paul's story. The next slide just is titled Trends in Homelessness, and I suppose I've got 2 pieces there. One is on the quantitative increase, and then the changing population, the demographics. I think you probably have had a lot of statistics, and you can read the statistics on any website, so I'm not going to go into too many numbers. But suffice to say, since the recession in 2008, we have seen a substantial increase in the numbers of people experiencing homelessness in one shape or another. Data going back over the years has shown almost a doubling net need of housing from 2005 through 2008 to 2011 and 2014. In the last number of months in 2016, there has been a significant increase in the overall homeless population, with the majority living in Dublin or the east of the country. So suffice to say, there is an increase in numbers experiencing homelessness. But when I look at the figures, it's 6,000 approximately, and don't quote me on that, but approximately 6,000. It's a small number in the bigger scheme of things if we have a population of 4.76 million. So how come we can't solve this problem or this issue? And the reason being is that it's complex. These are just some extracts taken from newspaper articles. Back in 1969, a group of students from Trinity set up a soup run, which is running to this day, 365 nights a year. And to use the language of the day, which was people were known as down and outs, they are still out on our streets, and they are overshadowed at the moment by the present level of homelessness, as well as the new families who are becoming homeless. But these same people, the traditional homeless population, are still there, but they are being pushed to the bottom of the pile. So the challenge, so if you see the, I'll try this, but, if you see this, these are all the acronyms that are being used at the moment to solve the issue of housing and homelessness. So if you have a look at them, I work in the sector and I can't keep track of half of what these acronyms mean, so you can imagine what it must be like for somebody trying to navigate the system. I put the OMG in the middle because that's how I feel when I have to try and work out what half of these things mean. I would imagine if you put all of those together under one roof, it might make a bit more sense in terms of economies of scale. But the challenge, Paul's biography, his way into homelessness is complex. His life is complex. And yet, we do have populist politics which sees homelessness as a problem to be eradicated. It's terrible, it's awful, it's unsightly. But homelessness and housing in the media all the time, all we hear are simplistic solutions, example, provision of housing. But this will not solve the problem into the near or distant future. Do we understand the complexities of homelessness? Houses do not address the root causes of homelessness. Do we believe what popular media outlets suggest to us and what some politicians propose? Solutions are seemingly simple. Provide accommodation and the problem will be resolved. Paul and so many people like Paul, who we see on a day-to-day basis coming through our services in Dublin Simon community, show us that this cannot be enough. Simplistic solutions disregard the complexities and the problems involved. So understanding the complexities. In addressing and moving towards a more mature way of tackling homelessness, we need to acknowledge the social dimensions of homelessness, the economic inequalities, the differential opportunities for social and societal participation, the intergenerational problem of social marginalisation and poverty. Children of today's homeless may very well become the next generation of homeless adults. But we also need to stop victimising people who are homeless by rendering them vulnerable in that we don't believe that they have powerful assets that contribute to creating flourishing and well communities. People who live on the street have had to be very resourceful. They frequently make vital connections. They have hidden talents and skills. If we don't tap into these capabilities and harness them, we further marginalise them from any attempt to tackle the challenges they are facing. They have to be our partners in our effort for the solution. People living with homelessness are citizens who have challenges but can also contribute to solutions. The needs of the next generation, the same issues will be there: poverty, social exclusion, inequality in access to education. The current generation and the previous generation have laid the foundation. Homelessness is intergenerational unless we can find a way to break it by addressing the social and social and economic inequalities that exist. And education, I believe, is one of those inequalities that do contribute to the poverty and the situation that lead people into homelessness. So, if we take a few moments to think about what images or thoughts you conjure up when you think about the meaning of home for you. So I just want you to take a moment to think about it. Okay. The concept of what creates a home is broad and complex. It could be the country you came from, the county you are from. It could be one site or many sites. It could be existing or could be somewhere you were forced to leave or chose to leave. It could be a place you lost because of war, antisocial behaviour, mortgage arrears, loss of job, or unable to care for the home due to illness or disability. Home is deeply personal and highly emotional and important to each individual's understanding of identity, of ourselves and who we are and what we want to achieve. Some words associated with home might include belonging, noisy, fun, safety, security, somewhere that you can be yourself, acceptance, supportive, comfortable, relaxing, all of those words. Now remember Paul. His words to describe home was where the family lived. He didn't even consider it a home. It was somewhere where the family lived. And his words to describe it were fear, anger, hurt, neglect, sadness, hopelessness, a sense of foreboding, abandonment, occasional happy moments, shame, hunger, cold, love of siblings and his mother, and a yearning for a home. We can't create a home for Paul or for the approximate 2,500 others similar to Paul in Ireland, but we can create the conditions and supports which could be a prerequisite for a home. If we only focus on housing, we don't create a good life or conditions for well-being. So think back to Paul for a moment. What makes him homeless? Is it only the fact that he doesn't have a roof over his head? Think about it for a moment. No, of course not. It's not that. A roof won't fix Paul's life. What we need to work towards is to create the conditions for human well-being and flourishing that respect people in their fundamental humanity, but also in their resourcefulness. A good life, a flourishing life, is more than having or living in a house. A home is more than a building. What makes people flourish? Research has shown that people who have secure social relationships find meaning in their life, have a sense of achievement, maximize positive emotions and feel engaged, have a high sense of well-being. So how can we create the conditions for people like Paul that he can view his life as a good life? How can we create the conditions for a flourishing home? So just in terms of research, Keyes and Seligman and others have introduced this concept of human flourishing, which involves meaning, feelings, relationships, tangible achievements. In terms of home, flourishing is linked to how you have lived your life, your social connections, your sense of place and belonging. The role home and neighbourhoods or communities play in our individual well-being and how this translates to the society of Ireland, all we need to do is look at some recent examples where community leaders in inner city Dublin have come out to try and advocate for their communities, to lead and support their communities in the fight against criminal gangs. It's not where you are from, it is how you feel about where you are from and the conditions in which you have to live. Poverty and inequality will always be with us, unfortunately, but we need to look at what individuals need to flourish. What contributes to a positive life experience? What supports individuals and communities to enhance their lives? So, conclusion. Creating these conditions that I've been talking about in terms of a flourishing home is also critical for the next generation. A stable home is important for creating good opportunities for education. Emergency accommodation is far from delivering this. Home is critical to enhancing opportunities for children. Education and learning can in turn contribute to the prevention of falling into the poverty trap and homelessness for the next generation, the one-generation solution. What we consider as home changes and alters throughout our life. The physical quality of the home and the social environment, along with the community setting, contributes towards well-being and mental health. What we consider home can change and alter over our lifetime. We may experience a sense of homelessness when forced to relocate to a new environment or location. For example, going to a nursing home, downsizing because the family have moved away, moving in with adult children, etc. We may experience a sense of loss of home. We lose familiarity, social relationships with neighbours or people in the locality with which you have lived. The space you have developed loses meaning. Emergency accommodation and housing alone will do little to combat the reality of homelessness for an individual or family. It merely gives you somewhere to stay. So finally, if we remember Paul, what could have worked for Paul? Early life family support and intervention, social support, someone constant to listen to and validate what Paul was going through. In later life, as with many others who find themselves in Paul's situation, the experience of homelessness adds another layer of complexity and trauma to what he is already carrying. Trauma in early childhood provides pathways into homelessness. So, in terms of what Paul would say, if only there had been someone there to support my mother. This is what saddens me the most. I can't come to terms with how, in this day and age, a family can be broken so much because the support was not accessible to us. He didn't say that it wasn't available, he just said it wasn't accessible to us because of where we lived, in inner city flat complex. We were a good family, but isolated due to domestic violence. We are all hurt, sad and traumatised, but this is only further isolating us from each other. If only I had access to the supports of which I'm accessing now, such as counselling or treatment, things could have been different. So I'm going to leave you on that note.